Hello. You guys, while we wait for everyone to get here, I just want to tell you a funny story, which is that just now I took the dog out to make sure that he was, going to be calm during our walk. And I was in my phone trying to find a song I wanted to listen to and looking down, like you're not supposed to do, like this. And I walked into a cactus. And it hurt. Like I was like, ah. And so then I touched it and it was just some kind of like hanging flowery cactus. But now I keep finding these little spindles like in my fingers and on my forehead. And so I was just trying to pull them all out with tweezers, but I can barely see them because they look like hairs. So that was I was cracking up at myself. I was like, I can't wait to tell the girls that I just walked my face into a cactus. That's my story. The end. These are California problems. Let me make sure that Jessie has the link. All right. I love seeing everyone's different. Carolyn is somewhere beautiful and outside. Laura's somewhere beautiful and outside. It's so nice to see you guys being somewhere beautiful and outside. Oh my gosh. Little spindles in my fingers. I keep finding them.
Try tape, like duct tape.
Oh, that's really smart. Thank you. I will try that.
Or do like, when you're a little kid, you put Elmer's glue in your palm and pretend you're a lizard and shed your skin. You can try that too.
Very smart. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good luck.
Such a dork. Okay, let's see here. As soon as Jessie gets here, as soon as the Money.Witch arrives, we will begin. Since she's our featured attraction today, we're just waiting on her. Hi, everybody. Ooh, also while we're waiting, if you guys want to see it, tomorrow's my birthday. And so, of course, I went shopping today to get a dress to wear to dinner tonight, tomorrow night. Do you guys want to see my birthday dress? It's pretty cute. You can't tell, but it's banging. Like it's just like super tight and it has a slit up the back. So I'm thinking like black pumps and like curls, lots of booties, red lips. Shush it. It's one of those dresses that looks like nothing on the hanger, but looks amazing on your body because it's just stretchy. Mm-hmm. It's just a tube on the hanger. little dog. Huh. So while we are waiting, did people get a chance to try the ritual, and how did it go? I'd love to hear about it. Did anybody do it? It was a weird one. I like it though. Did anyone do anything to observe the new moon if they didn't do the ritual that I sent? Did anyone do something? I'm unmuting you. What did you do?
Oh, I'm unmuted. I think I did mine before or maybe I did it the same day the email came out, but either way, I didn't see the email. So I just did my own thing. And it was my very first day after I had gone on leave of absence from my job.
Yay!
To get focused. And so I made a little altar, a little pretty plate that I have with like chocolate and fine foods and $100 bill, and I lit some candles for Beltane, and I wove a little ribbon bracelet and just set some intentions. It was real nice.
Yay! I love that. And that's right in line, even if you didn't do it exactly on the new moon, it's right in line with the vibe of the Taurus moon, so that's perfect. I'm trying to see if I got a message. Oh, okay. Jessie Susannah messaged me. She has a child. So she said, I need a couple more minutes. I'm getting the kids situated. Letting her know here. I posted a reminder in the group so everybody knows. Coffee, water, dog. Oh, I need my handouts.
I had a pen. Where did it go?
I'm really excited about this. I have been following Jessie for a while on Instagram, and it totally just worked out that she was able to come do this for us and be available at this time. So I'm very excited. Ow! Okay, I'm trying tape, not hurt, but I'm trying. For those of you who missed this announcement when I was getting on the call, right before the call, I was walking down the street and dicking around on my phone trying to find a song to listen to and walked into a cactus. These are the hazards of not being present. Serves me right. The cactus was right. I was wrong. I was in her space. Well, hey, I think I'm getting things though. Can't tell. Well, okay, I'm gonna do another thing while we're waiting. She's coming. She texted. She's coming. But I'm gonna ask Allie another question.
Okay.
So we had a one-on-one this week. How has it been going since then? And do you want to update the group about what's going on for you? Because you're making some big moves.
Yeah. So if y'all don't know, I've soft quit my job At my day job, it was like an office thing, a work from home office call center sort of thing. And I hated it. So I don't want to do it anymore. And I would prefer to make art full time and work on that. So I'm putting together a business plan and trying to figure out exactly what I want to do with myself in this. I have 2 months off of work, and if I succeed well enough, I'm just gonna say goodbye to that job. I haven't made a lot of headway on the business plan. I've been letting it percolate, and it's been kind of hard for me to sit and do it. So I'm glad we have extra time. I'll have time to do it this week.
Yeah.
What have I worked on though? Oh, I did. I made quite a lot of money driving Uber last night, so that was exciting at least. And the Hofla was a smashing success. I think we might get a couple new students out of it.
And I saw that you posted a new class starting. So that's good.
There's a new class session starting. I'll have a 6-week class and a 4-week class. And I'm trying to get another person to start a second 4-week class. It's just for baby beginners. And I know the pricing on them isn't quite what it should be yet, but I need something to get going while I figure out the details.
Our guest is here.
Hey.
Oh, hi. Wait, let me unmute you. Hi.
I'll just leave it to you. Should I go ahead and intro myself, or what's the?
I just wanted to make sure you could hear me. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear everything. Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, this is Jessie Susannah, aka the Money.Witch.
Hi.
We are all very excited to have you. And they've all been prepped, and the floor
Cool.
is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. So should I just dive right in?
Why not?
Awesome, cool. Thank you. Thank you everybody for your patience. I had to make sure my kid could get dinner together, and it was taking a lot longer than it might have. So shout out to anyone else who had to do that to be on this call this evening. Yeah. Anyway, you guys got the handouts that we sent the other day, and basically this is going to be a shortened version of like about a 3-hour workshop that I teach called Heal Your Finances. So I want to kind of give you the formula for this, and then hopefully like empower you to kind of take it as a like an ignition point or a seed planting point, so that you can go from there out into I don't know, obtaining like other tools and information that you need to kind of catalyze change in your financial life. So this program, or, you know, set of steps, right? Everyone has seen that handout, right, with the steps. Okay, so that it's a system, and in this particular situation, we're talking about healing your finances. It's a system for me that I feel like could be used to heal almost anything. But we're kind of like honing in on finances here. So I want to walk you through the steps, and then hopefully it just kind of creates a little guideline and a little structure to catalyze change and hopefully approach movement with the intention of healing in your financial lives, and just like make space for that to shift. My assumption is also like if you're showing up today, there's something that's like interesting to you about creating change in your financial life, creating movement or healing in your financial life. So this is sort of like designed to be a little start to that. So I guess firstly, I want to say thank you for being here with me. It's an honor to be invited, and also I know that people's financial lives are very intimate. It's like a very intimate part of your life, so I appreciate you entrusting me to enter that area of your life with you, and I take that as an honor, so thank you. I'm going to hold that. again, as we said, I'm Jessie Susannah. I run a business called Money.Witch. Other things that I do is one-on-one coaching. So if there are things that like get started or sparked for you today where you're like, I need to flesh out a practical, emotional, logistical, magical plan in order to move, like feel more movement on these things, please feel free to reach out to me about it. Okay, and then I want to try to move through the talk in like about 40 minutes so that then there's space to ask questions after that. Because I know that that part is like interesting and needed. Is there one more thing I was going to say? For me, I feel like, you know, one of the biggest things that I see coming up in people's financial lives is avoidance, right? People avoid things for multiple reasons because they're feeling overwhelmed. It just doesn't seem manageable. There's often like other things woven in, right? Like there's other feelings and other underlying experiences about like self-worth, worthiness. Those are all like super relevant, right? Because we're in this Taurus season, Taurus New Moon time. Things about values, things about family, things about success and achievement and desire and our body and food and all these things are often like interwoven into people's financial life, or the way that at least the like material that is sort of underlying people's experience of their financial life. And so there's just a lot of desire to sort of avoid, because it just in that really simple way where it's like you go near something that feels like difficult or painful and it's just like, no, like let's not touch the like hot pot on the stove desire. So I feel like it's a really like what's the word, instinctual desire on some level, and there's like no shame that needs to be in it. But honestly, you know, your finances is like, this is your means of survival in this world. It's your way that you fuel almost everything else in your life. And it's often like volatile, and it's often involves things that you're running from, like especially if there's like debt, you know, credit debt, student loans, any of that you're kind of like avoiding or running away from, or even things like knowing your credit score or knowing how much there is in your bank account, all those things. Avoidance is not something we need to feel ashamed of, but it is absolutely like the most disempowered stance you could possibly be taking. So in any situation, like having your back to something, having your back to like, for example, student loan, you know, credit or something like that, like having your back to the reality of your financial situation means that you know, you're just not in control. You don't know who's coming for you. You don't know like what they want. You don't know what the information is. You don't know the terrain that you're like fighting on. I'm in Aries, so everything's like a battle for me, but like you don't know, you know, you just don't know like what you're up against, right? And you don't, if you haven't taken the time to be in self-awareness about like what is going on in your financial landscape on an underlying like emotional level, spiritual emotional level, then you also don't know like what is even the internal terrain, the internal landscape that you're going to have to be aware of or navigate, like the way that we have to navigate ourselves and our own ways of being in our own experience when we're dealing with finances, right? So, you know, if you got like one takeaway from this today, my hope would be for it to be like just that, turning toward your finances, turning toward financial information is going to be regardless, honestly, of any kind of like logistical or like, I'm not even saying turning towards it is going to fix your financial problems. What I'm saying is like turning towards it will make you have a more empowered experience of interacting with your finances. That's just true, right? So even if nothing changes, even if the situation is out of control, like, you know, people have like $200,000 plus in student loans, things like that, right? Like situations where you're just like, I don't know how to fix this situation. Turning toward it is going to change the way that you relate to your finances, but it's also going to change the way you relate to yourself, your self-esteem, and therefore like that ripples out into the way that you are interacting with the world and just like being in the world. And that's really important. So that would be like my number one, honestly, like if that was the only takeaway, I would be like, okay, take that one. That would be good. I would be happy with that. The antidote to that, right? Like we're turning to face financial information, and then what we're working with after that is what I would call financial intimacy, building greater intimacy with your financial information, right? So we build intimacy with our finances and intimacy with our financial information in the same way that we build intimacy with anything, right? Which is by showing up consistently, by paying attention to what's going on, what's the state of the thing that we're trying to be intimate. So what's the state of our finances? You know, what are our finances needs? And then, you know, doing our best to kind of fill our finances needs as we can, and checking in with it often enough that we notice when things change, right? Like we notice, you know, for example, just like bank statement, right? We notice like, oh, there's a charge on here that's not supposed to be on here. Or we notice like, oh, I got a service charge for something, or my phone bill's $20 more than it usually is. Like, why is that happening, right? So we're checking in with it often enough that if we have that intimacy, we're going to like be able to notice what's different from the last time we were there. And because we have that intimacy and we're building that like knowledge, we're going to be able to move more closely and with more agility in our financial world. Because like an example of not being close with your finances and then kind of not being able to navigate your finances or having a challenge in navigating finances, like because of a lack of intimacy, would be, for example, like not checking your balance, like your bank account balance, before you buy things or pay bills, and then overdrafting, right? Getting those like $35 overdraft fees, $25 overdraft fees. And then, you know, seeing it or getting the letter in the mail, like, oh, this happened, you know, not knowing until like that letter happens, right? So rather than, you know, being in the store, you know, checking the mobile app or whatever, see how much you have in your bank account and either make a decision about like what you're going to buy or if you could transfer money from another account, those kinds of things. Because a lot of times it's not just having the money, right? Like maybe you had a little bit of like kept into consideration, oh, I should get it from this account instead of this account. Or maybe be like, oh, okay, well, in order to not get the overdraft fee, I'm going to put it on my credit card. I'm only going to pay, you know, whatever % on that. And then I'm going to be able to pay it off at the next, you know, I'm getting paid in 2 days or something like that, right? So when we have intimacy with the information, we're close with the information, then we're able to move with that information in a way that is more like nuanced and is more, just allows us to make choices that are better for us, right? Like holistically better. And it allows us to feel like we are in control, right? Like we're in control of what's happening. We are making choices intentionally. Because even if you like look in your bank account and you're like, I don't have money for this, I'm going to do it anyway. I know I'm going to get an overdraft fee. That's just what's up this week. Like that's a more empowered decision than being like, I don't want to look I'm not going to look, and then getting the same overdraft fee. Exact same scenario, same exact identical consequences, but one is like a more empowered experience than the other one. Okay, so pulling your finances and your financial information closer to you for more intimacy. So that means really like knowing the landscape of your finances. So that means knowing like, you know, all accounts that you have, all bank accounts. It also means knowing all debt accounts, knowing like how much you owe into who, what's the interest rate, those kinds of things. And then any like investment or that kind of stuff. So sometimes people like had a job 10 years ago, they had a 401k and they have some money from it somewhere, even if they're not saving for retirement now, things like that, right? Like having a grasp on everything that's a part of your financial landscape, and just like having more intimacy with the information. Okay, so those are the fundamental kind of premises, right? Like turning towards your financial information, building that intimacy that I want to kind of operate from when we're talking through the rest of the steps. Okay, so it doesn't give me the time when okay, cool, perfect. Okay, so this worksheet that you have, Healing Your Finances, I think there's, okay, so the 3 different ones, one has the 7 steps listed out, and then one has the 7 steps listed out, but there's like a little bit of space to write on. Does that, for anyone who has it printed out? Okay, so, you know, you can do it today or not do it today if you have it printed out or not. But it's an opportunity for you to use, the one with the space to write it out is like an opportunity for you to use the worksheet to like go through the steps with a particular situation. So if you want to take it, you know, on any particular financial situation that you're dealing with and work through those steps, you can use that to kind of like gain a little bit of sense of control or a little structure in terms of making like change and movement in your financial life. And then there's also one that's like a little more illustrated out. That's kind of like a funner version where it's like, these are the tools I have. These are the challenges. Here's like some steps I'm going to take. I think that's a really good worksheet for just like feeling like you're going to take some like bite-sized movement, some bite-sized change in a bigger problem, right? So even if it's like, okay, I know I have all this debt. It's all like tangled up. I don't know what I'm going to do, but here I can like map out 3 steps, right? Like I'm going to like, you know, look at my credit report online, sign up for Credit Karma, look at my credit report online, you know, make a list of how much they're saying I owe and to who. Okay, that's 3 steps that you took. You made some movement. Some movement is going to be healing. There's going to be some change in your life. Okay, so we're going to start talking through the 7 steps, and I'm going to give just like a few minutes on each one so that you have this sort of like framework and system. So step 1 is believe in and own your capacity for change. So this is almost like a pre-step, like what I would call a pre-step, but I list it because it's a really big one because a lot of people get stuck here. And if you're stuck here, it's really hard to move forward into like any of the other pieces that are involved in creating shift or change. So believing in your capacity for change means that I mean, literally just like that you believe you can change. Like what shows up a lot here is shame, right? And people sort of being like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong. Like I can't do it. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, I can't get out of debt. Like I can't save money. I can't do anything any differently than how I'm doing it now. But really, truly, honestly, and it's like, it's not this easy. There's a lot of things when I talk through these steps where I'm just going to say it like pretty matter-of-factly, but I'm not saying it to make it seem like it should be easy. I'm just saying it like, because, you know, we're just framing it, but really like shame, you know, not believing in your own capacity for change is like based in shame, and shame is a huge, huge fucking waste of time. It is like literally the biggest waste of time that we could possibly engage in our human lives. So we have one human life, probably, and we're in it, and we're like blessed to be in this particular incarnation of life, of a body and of an experience. and believing that something's wrong with us and we can't be in a good like place, you know, we can't like change. Other people can change, but we can't, you know, like if you fundamentally like believe that other people can change, then you have to believe that you can change and grow and be healthier too, right? So to kind of like give ourselves that same permission and love that we give other people. And to make space to like show up and love ourselves the way that we often are able to love other people, right? So to look at like, what are the ways that you show up when you're loving someone else? And I know for a lot of people, especially people who like are on a healing journey or just like have healer like tendencies, right? Like a lot of the people that we engage in, we're like really preoccupied with like our capacity or what we know that we can, ways that we know we can help other people heal, right? Like the people around us, ways that we know we can help them do better in their lives and supporting them in that. And we need to be able to give that same gift to ourselves. That's what self-love looks like. So clearing that shame out of the way and believing that you can change. So it's something that's worth just sort of like sitting in and noticing whether or not you're like getting stuck at all in that place of like feeling like I can't create change in my financial life before you sort of start to move on through the other pieces. Step number 2, meet and observe yourself without judgment to gather information. Again, this is like a place where we're like, okay, we're taking that shame and we're going to move it out of the way so that we can be in a place where we're able to just be self-aware and observe about ourselves in a way that doesn't have shame piled on top of it, right? So we're just like, oh, let me just notice these things. Let me notice the way that like if I have a bad day at work, like I want to go to Target on the way home. Let me notice the way that like, you know, if I'm upset about or like I got in a fight with my mom that, you know, I'm like using shopping to deal with that. Let me notice the way that I'm like spending money to, you know, create a certain perception for maybe like going home for the holidays, right? And being like, oh, I'm going to spend money on all these presents to sort of make it seem like I'm in a financially successful place, even though that's not really like my real experience. So these different things that we're doing and just noticing it, right? Like, oh, let me just really see what I'm doing. Let me just really observe like what it is that I'm actually doing in a real sort of scientific way, right? Bring that kind of like Aquarius energy in. And just sort of like hang back and observe with as like sort of little emotion as possible. Because this information, like this self-awareness, I feel like comes to us more easily when we're able to sort of like block our inner judgment voices, right? Because it's like if things are coming out, like our behaviors are becoming more present to us and then we're like jumping in with that criticism layer. It's like no one wants to open up to somebody who's like criticizing them all the time, including yourself, opening up to yourself about like things that are true. Like if you're just gonna like jump in with that criticism voice, then a lot of times I feel like it's really a hindrance to self-awareness, right? Because we don't want to, we don't want to be criticized, right? Like even by our own inner voices. Okay, so observing yourself without judgment, gathering information. And these steps are cyclical, right? Like we're not like just walking through this one time, right? So we're gathering information. Another time we'll be back gathering information about something else, right? That's how it works. But we're just gathering information about whatever particular situation we're kind of dealing with or we're being confronted with in the moment or just whatever wants to unveil itself to us at this time too, right? Being really ready to change something, like being really like seeing it and feeling it and kind of like being sick of your own whatever it is like a really excellent time to change, you know? So sometimes it's sort of like, just look at what's unveiling itself to you as something that you are actually ready to create change on already, to create momentum for like, you know, building up after that. Or pushing it on like things that you would like to change, but maybe aren't quite ready to let go of. Okay. Step 3 is identify and own your financial desires, what you really want. So there's an exercise I like to suggest to people with this one. and it's to do what we call like a money garden meditation. So you kind of like take yourself into whatever meditative stance or place that you like to be in, which can, if you don't have any kind of like meditation practice, it can even just be a kind of daydreamy space. I feel like that is like a perfectly meditative space that you get set up in any whatever kind of meditation or like centered or visioning or daydreaming kind of space you want to be in. And you imagine that you're in your money garden. So you just sort of like look around and just observe like what's there. What does it look like? What's growing? How's it set up? What does it look like? And you can kind of take some notes and journal about it. And then you imagine walking out the gate of your money garden and taking a walk down the street. And when we take walks down the street, right, we're like looking at everybody's yard and houses and deciding like whose yard and house we're jealous of or what we like and don't like about everybody else's houses. So you kind of walk down the street until you find the house with the money garden in front of it where you're like, ooh, I really like that one. And then just do a little journaling about like, what does that one look like? What's it set up like? How's it growing? And just like make some observations for yourself from that about your financial desires. Like, what is it that you really want? A lot of times we don't allow ourselves to have access to just seeing what we want. Because again, we're like heaping either judgment or we're shutting those things down, right? Like, well, don't want that because you can't have it. Or, you know, we're pulling in our inner parent voices. If we were parented with voices that said things like, you know, I don't know, whatever, your eyes are too big, or, you know, I don't know, I just hear all kinds of stuff like, where'd you, basically shamed, right? Like if you were shamed for wanting things as a kid, which often comes from our parents feeling ashamed that they can't provide those things for us, right? So putting that on us instead. So if you have that experience growing up, then this is a place where it might be hard for you to identify what you actually really want, because you're not used to like being in a place of validating your own desires. Other awesome ways. So again, like that, the meditation and the kind of visualization, that's just a tool to access our subconscious, right? So access information that might be in our subconscious that's not like immediately on the surface, and kind of like navigate and weave in between those spaces. There's other, like any kind of divination tool is going to do the same thing, right? So tarot cards, journaling, kind of like dream journaling, any of those things can help you start to pull out some of that information. Another place where you can notice things that are financial desires of yours is things that you're jealous of. Jealousy is a really excellent tool in realizing like what are the things that you actually want. Is like those little financial things that you're jealous of for other people, you know, and digging in underneath it, right? Like you might be like, oh, I felt jealous because this person, you know, got this fancy car or whatever. And maybe you're like, why do I even feel jealous about that? Like that car's ugly. I don't even care. Like, I don't even want a fancy car. But maybe you're jealous because, you know, maybe the information that's there for you is something that's more upon the lines of, like, I'm jealous that they're in a stable enough place that they could like desire something and get it for themselves, you know? So, okay, then that's your financial desire, right? To be in a place where you feel like if I really want something, I can get it for myself, you know? Or maybe you're jealous because they have a tool that can help them and you feel like, oh, well, I don't have a car right now, but if I had a car, like it would really help me be able to, you know, do this kind of work that I want to do, or like, you know, start this business I want to start, or something like that. So just noticing for yourself, like what's in there underneath the jealousy. And also just taking some time to do some like intentional journaling, list writing, goal setting, any of that kind of stuff around your financial desires. Like how much money do you actually really want to be making? Which is aside from it being realistic in terms of like often people undercut how much they want or need to make in a month pretty drastically because they sort of want to pick a number that feels reasonable or feels attainable. But we want those numbers to be, generally bigger because they need to incorporate things like saving for retirement, saving money for emergencies, like having money for expenses that only come once a year, like, car insurance or holidays or your birthday or, your kids' birthdays, things like that, right? So we want to make sure that those like monthly numbers are holding something like that. So kind of like pushing yourself to kind of go big and be like, oh, this is the number. I'm going to set goals that are based on like the number of what I really need, not something where I'm like sort of trying to undercut or undersell myself. But yeah, getting realistic about those kind of numbers, like monthly, what you like to be bringing in, what you would ultimately like your housing situation to be like, what you would ultimately like your retirement savings to look like, saving for short-term things like trips or starting a business or like making an investment or making an investment in your family in some sort of way. Those are all parts of your financial desire. So making some intentional space and time to write about those things, think about those things more clearly. Okay, step number 4, create and own financial intentions. So this is where an intention is the place where our sort of desires turn the corner into becoming actions, right? So we're saying like, okay, I want this thing. I'm now creating an intention that I am going to engage in turning this desire into something that really exists in real life, in my actual day-to-day life, right? So all you have to do is sort of write your desire in an intention-based way, So whatever that is, like we were saying with the car example, like my intention is, it can be something really specific, right? Like my intention is by the end of 2019, I'm going to have a car that is in good enough shape that I know every day it's going to work, or it could be broader than that, more like energetic. Like my intention is, that I'm like working in a direction that I know that I am going to have enough money to take care of, whatever I need, right? So if that's a car or that's a whatever, like I need to move or, I need to pay a bill that came up out of nowhere. My intention is to have enough money in savings that I feel, and enough money in earning that I feel prepared to supply myself with whatever needs arise for me. Step number 5 is really like the biggest, sort of meatiest of all of the steps. So this is explore and own your blocks. All of these have and own in them because it's one thing, right, to do something mentally, and it's another thing to like really bring it down into your body and really like take ownership of it. So what I mean by and own is like internalize, take responsibility for, take ownership of whatever it is, the desire, the behavior, the belief, the intention, the block, right? Like, so now we're talking about blocks. So taking ownership of the block, right? Like whatever that is, whatever it is, I don't want to check my bank account balance because I'm afraid that I'm going to see that I don't really have enough money to be, spending the way that I do. And so I rather just not look at it. Right. So that avoidance, and then just being like, yeah, okay, I am doing that. Right. Like really taking responsibility. Like, yes, that's a thing that I'm doing. You don't even have to change the behavior. All of these things, like you don't have to change the behavior. You don't have to change any behaviors that you don't want to, or you're not ready to change, but just taking ownership of not being ready, taking ownership of the fact that you actually do that thing, right? Rather than living in kind of like denial of your own behaviors. Okay. So looking at what is getting in your way mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and logistically. In the like 3-hour version of this workshop, we would spend about an hour and a half right now talking about like potential, like all the different things that could potentially be getting in your way. So there are a lot of them, and they're big. I'm going to just sort of tell you a couple just to sort of like bring some ideas together of like things that I might be thinking of when I'm like thinking of this type of blocks. Shame is a big one, right? We already talked about that one earlier, right? Shame, something's wrong with you. Guilt, which is like measuring your behavior or your actions against other people's values. Lack of boundaries can show up in people's financial lives. I don't want to say bad, but like incomplete or like not, I don't say incomplete energetic hygiene, if that makes sense to people. So sort of like not protecting your energy, not like clearing your energy, not cleaning your energy enough, right? So just carrying around a lot of other people's stuff with you. Unexplored and unhealed grief shows up in people's financial lives really hugely. That can be like grieving for an actual loss, potentially, you know, because all these things, right? Like divorce, death, parents, children, these things are all intertwined in our financial lives, right? So all of our feelings and all of our relationships and the feelings about them can show up in the way that we're interacting with money. Unhealed grief around your own childhood. There's a lot of, just like the way we do in romantic relationships, there's a lot of trying to compensate and get something that we didn't get in childhood in the way that we're interacting with our finances right now. I find it very, very helpful to identify what ages of like injured inner child is running your finances. That is like often very huge for people, right? So if that's like, oh, that's like, you know, 7-year-old me who like, you know, really wanted whatever and was told like, we can't have it. And now she's just like in there running things like just being like, yes, buy it all the time, you know? Or, you know, whether it's like 13-year-old us who wanted, you know, to be able to like navigate social situations at school a certain way and felt like we needed to have certain clothes in order to do that. And then like that wasn't provided by our family or, you know, whatever. These are all different things. And there are different parts of ourselves and different ages of ourselves that like show up really heavily in terms of the way that we're navigating something. And again, right, like we can talk about anything. You talk about your relationship to food, your relationship to intimacy, your relationship to friendship, but we're talking about relationship to money. They're all very, you know, they're all similar. Let's see, other blocks. There are extremely real systemic blocks that exist, and I want to like honor and acknowledge that in saying that, you know, everything that is impacting your financial life is not a direct result of your own like behavior. I'm not like a law of attraction chick. It's not my style, right? Like, I think like, you know, there's things that happen that have to do with like how you were raised, class, education, access, race, gender, physical ability, geographically where you're located in the country, if you live in a city, or you live in the, you know, out in the country, etc. Like all those things do impact your financial experience, and those things are real. So this is not about like trying to take ownership or take responsibility for those things, but it's about owning them as part of your experience too, right? So really like looking at what you do have control over and what you don't have control over, and making sure that you're going to take action and participate in an empowered way in the things that you do have control over. Okay. So some of those blocks can even be like logistical things, like we were saying earlier, like, okay, I want to start a business, but in order to do that, you know, I need to be able to do craft fairs and, you know, or go, you know, do different events, different places, pop-ups, etc. And in order to do that, I need a vehicle that works, and my vehicle doesn't really work. So I'm having to say no to a lot of like opportunities that I'm getting, or, you know, something like that. Right. So that's like an example of like a more logistical or practical block. Or even like, oh, my roommate situation is really not healthy for me. Like the person I live, like, I don't like, you know, how much work I'm having to do emotionally, like to be around the people that I live with, whether it's your family or not your family. It's like eating up a lot of my energy, and it's not allowing me to feel energized and excited when I'm like engaging in, you know, business, work, getting organized for myself, self-care, those kinds of things. Okay, so there's a lot in there about the blocks. And I think it's helpful, right, when you're doing that worksheet, you're just dealing with one issue, right? So we don't have to be like, what's everything that's showing up to be like any kind of block at all in our financial lives. We can just sort of like take one issue. Okay, this is, you know, one financial desire that I'm kind of workshopping, like, you know, how do I create intention out of it? And then what's getting in my way, right? Because we're going on a journey. We're saying like, I want to get, when we create an intention, here's where we are now. Here's where I want to be. I'm going to like walk a path from here to there. What are the like obstacles that I'm going to encounter when I'm walking that path, right? Like it's like a video game or something. Like what are the different things I'm going to come up against that I need to be ready for, whether those are internal or external blocks. And then that segues into step number 6, which is obtain and own tools to help in the work of breaking down those blocks. So whatever those specific blocks are, you know, if you're like, okay, I'm trying to get from A to B, and I know I'm going to like reach the 3 things. It's like, I never thought about this before, but it's like Dora the Explorer. Has everybody watched Dora the Explorer? Maybe. Okay. Do people have kids? If you have kids, you watch Dora the Explorer. Okay. Anyway, how it goes is just, okay, cool. You get your little backpack, and they're like, oh, in order to get from here to there, we're going to, you know, whatever, Abuela's house. In order to get there, I have to go through the troll bridge and the, you know, volcano mountain and the like, etc. And then we're going to have like our little backpack, and we're going to have tools in it that are going to help us, you know, on each of those like encounters, right? I mean, I guess it's just sort of like a classic fairy tale idea too, right? Like we are like on this path, we're walking this path, and we're going to encounter these certain challenges, and we need to have the right tools, right? Because doing a job with the right tool always saves you time, physical effort, money, all those things, right? So if we want to approach like a block or a challenge in the right way, we want to obtain the right tools. So it might be a certain piece of information. Like maybe we're like, what I want to do, you know, something I know I need to do is like read my bank statement every month. And then you start reading it, and you notice that you start glazing over, and you're like, oh, I'm glazing over because there's certain terms on here that I don't understand, right? Like I don't understand how interest works. I don't know what APR means. I don't know whatever. This doesn't really make sense to me. So then, you know, identifying that block and being like, okay, the tool is like, I need to just learn what these things mean. I need to just like Google an article about like how to read a credit card statement. You know, I'm just, even though maybe I feel dumb, like, why don't I know how to read a credit card statement? I'm like, you know, 37 years old or whatever, or however we feel about it. Like that judgment is unnecessary. It just is like being like, this is the tool that you need, and you deserve to have access and to like make the effort and to access tools that work for you, that make sense to you, that work for your brain, that work for the way that you navigate the world, your brain navigates the world. And there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different kinds of financial tools. And it could be an emotional tool, right? So maybe it's like, oh, I'm realizing like, you know, I have this inheritance from my dad, and I'm realizing like that actually I didn't like properly grieve when he died. And so therefore, like, I'm spending this money like really in a way that doesn't serve me or isn't in my integrity because I have a complicated relationship to this money. Okay, maybe I need to like go talk to my therapist or get a therapist to talk about like going back in and doing some like grieving about when my dad died, like whenever that was, things like that, right? So those kinds of tools can be varied. They could be practical, they can be spiritual, emotional, they can be magical, sort of like more existential tools. But for you to sort of start to identify like what are the tools that you need to get through these particular challenges or blocks, and then identify them for yourself. And then 7 is the shortest step of them all, which is take action, keep trying. You will definitely fail. I think that's like, I don't remember where I heard it. I just don't, maybe it's a Brene Brown thing. I don't know, but it's just like that thing, like if you try something, it's not that you might fail or there's a possibility of failing, like you'll definitely fail, right? Like if you're trying to do anything, but then you just keep trying, and then it's like at some point you will like have success in that area. You know, doing something uncomfortable is like often uncomfortable, you know, the first 10 times that we do it. So, okay. So giving yourself permission to fail and to keep trying some more. I'm going to wrap it at that because I really do want there to be space to talk and answer questions. And that feels more important to me than like going in depth in any of these things. But I hope that that sort of like truncated version can at least like, even if it's not all the information you need, it is at least like something that sort of catalyzes something or brings some fresh ideas to you about like where, like what kind of moves that you can make for yourself moving forward out of this in whatever particular challenges you're working with around your finances right now. So I don't know how you do it to like facilitate questions.
People just.
Huh? Okay. Oh, like, wait, as in raising hands?
Yeah, people are like, good, I'll unmute people.
Okay, cool. Does anyone have questions they want to ask?
Yeah, anybody?
Oh my God, really? I'll literally answer any question about anything. Go ahead.
Which guy's question? All right, I think I unmuted.
So, I've just come up, how do I start this? So I just saw the dentist last week, and because of the fact that many years ago, they put braces on me, lots of work has been done on my mouth. It's always been a problem. It's getting really bad now, and I saw a specialist for it, and I got super excited because they can fix me, which is great. The problem is it's $27,000, and it's not a payment plan. It's kind of, you gotta, well, okay, over 2 years it's a payment plan, but that's a lot of money over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to wrap my brain around it on how to come up with the funds. And I'm a little lost because I really don't want to go into hock for this, but I do want to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this catch-22 on how I manage this.
How have you approached it in the past when you've had to make large purchases or investments?
I've never had to do something like this before. I mean, yes, we've had our house, but then we had savings for that. And all those savings have gone primarily towards the house stuff. And we're, there's still things. I mean, we have a little bit of savings, but nothing like this.
Do you have other debt?
Yeah, there's, monthly credit card debt that we use. We are very good about paying down our debt.
Mm-hmm.
We're paying debt off our credit cards every month. But we do have a second, like a home equity loan on the house, but there's not. We could refinance. I'm not sure I want to do that because we got stupidly lucky with a 3.5% interest rate, and
Yeah.
so I'm a little overwhelmed, as it were.
Yeah. This is an instance where I would say that, okay, so every time I'm looking at a financial issue, I want to look at it from 3 angles. So there's like the practical, logistical, there's the spiritual, emotional, and then there's the magical, energetic angle. So I would say, first of all, from a magical, energetic level, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know any of you guys, so I don't really know like what your personal practices are like, but I would definitely be, like creating positive energy or like putting out intention or lighting a candle or, praying or asking for ancestor support or spirit support and saying like, my intention is to like go through this piece of physical healing. Like I would like to be supported in having the funds like access to the funds open up to me in some sort of way. Then in that, I would, with the spiritual emotional, I would definitely be doing some space to kind of like look up like what within yourself is showing up in this experience, right? Like how is that experience of like having all that dental work or, the original experience, if there's like resentment towards like the original experience, or there's like, you feel like it's unfair. You don't want to spend money, there's something there too, right? Like, I don't want to have to spend this much money on this. This isn't fair. Who do you think is responsible? Like, who do you hold responsible? Is it the doctor? Is it your parents? Do you feel like they should pay for it? You feel resentful to like further things that they like couldn't provide or didn't provide, or their decision making, all those things, right? So to really be like, what of that type of stuff is showing up present in this experience, and try to like do some parallel work on that stuff to kind of like release it, right? Because as long as you kind of feel that tightness, like I don't even want to spend this money,
right?
Then it's gonna be really fucking hard to spend that money or to have it come to you, or like anything about it, right? Yeah. So really trying to like loosen that up and do some releasing as much as you possibly can around that, so that because really what you want is like to come into like a space where you can feel like just truly, honestly grateful that this is available to you, and that somehow you're like, you have like a financially stable enough life that you can access this treatment, even if you do it by accessing debt, right? Like you have enough other pieces, or like the credit score or the, the equity, those kinds of things, that you can get it, even if what you have to do is like put it on multiple credit cards or something like that, right? Like you can do it. So I think as much as you can emotionally to like move into that space of sort of like being grateful, just like being grateful that you have access to this, and being grateful that like through some way you will find a way to pay for it. And then on a logistical level, I would say, it sounds like you and like whatever family you own your home with are kind of operating in a like, it sounds like it's important for you to like be thoughtful and planned out in the way that you do things, right? And feel like that you're making responsible decisions and good decisions. So I know that you'll want to like put that kind of lens on it. But to be able to, like, I would say this is what is sort of considered like good debt, right? Like, because good debt is an investment, and this is like a huge investment, right? Not just in like your physical health, but also in kind of like coming to a conclusion at something that has been ongoingly like, painful, bothersome, expensive, etc. Just like that there hasn't been closure around. So I would honestly say like, that kind of money is the kind of money you might need to like leverage some debt in order to access. But I feel like this is a situation in which it is like a reasonable and responsible choice to do that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm actually, immediately I had my therapy session yesterday and we brought all of this up. So
Yeah.
So I am working on that, but thank you. All right.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
I do. No one else is going to ask one. And this may be helpful for, there are 2 other ladies on this call and more in the group, but there are 2 other ladies on this call who are either in the early stages of starting a business or run businesses. I guess I would love to hear some thoughts or tips or advice for helping to expand kind of your upper limit cap on what's possible for you. So one thing that I know comes up for me, and I'm really identifying this and working through this right now, is I've been basically completely self-employed and in the arts self-employed since I was like 18 years old. But rather than necessarily being shamed for wanting stuff when I was a kid, like the way that my mom navigated us through poverty was like in this very practical way. So like I didn't know we were poor until I was way older, but if I asked for something, she would just take out the budget and be like, okay, well, what do you want to give up? You know, like if you want that thing, are you willing to sacrifice this other thing, or do you not really want it that much? And it was always this relationship of like, for the cost of this one new thing, we could go to Goodwill and get these 5 used things, or is it worth it to you to miss out on renting a movie this month to have this like other thing that you want or whatever. So I have always managed my life in this way where like, as long as I can cover my barest of necessities, I feel happy, right? I'm like, oh, I got it. Like, I'm good. I can pay my rent. All my bills are paid. I have groceries. Like, but I will literally manage myself down to like the last $5 of my money at the end of the month, as opposed to kind of operating at a higher level where I am actively saving and really comfortable. And if anything happened, I would have money on hand for it. And I'm progressively getting better every year about nudging that number upward. But this is the first year where I set an income goal for myself that's so big that I almost have like, I don't believe it feeling about it. And it's not that big. Like it is like a super small number for most business owners, for many business owners. But for me, it's the biggest number I've asked of myself. So I guess I was like, do you have advice or tips or ideas for like how we can kind of push our own internal glass ceiling up a little higher?
Yeah, it reminds me, I mean, part of it is like literally just moving the external bar, like you're saying, you know, and then noticing like what comes up internally that is uncomfortable about it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you've set the goal, and then like, what do you notice that's like uncomfortable internally about trying to actually get there? So I think like actually really like making those external goals higher or bigger than you know you're comfortable with to like start with is helpful. It reminds me of a client I was working with where it's like it's a slightly different, it's not necessarily about earning, but she works in like entirely cash economy, and she like only deposits enough in the bank to like you know, pay her bills, whatever. But it's like I do her taxes and we, you know, pull all her money at the end of the year, and she paid like $1,000 in overdraft fees by like not putting enough money in the bank and then overdrafting, even though she had some cash at home and could have like not overdrafted. And we were talking about basically like she just feels really comfortable because like her whole adult life she's just felt really comfortable like spending her bank account down to zero, you know. So she's like, oh, I just need however much is going to go in here, and then we just spend it down to zero, and then we like put money in again, and you know, I'll earn money, we'll spend it down to zero. But so we had this thing where we're like 1,000 is the new zero. So being like, okay, actually like to start having a relationship to the number like $1,000, that's like, oh, when my bank account's getting to like $1,000, like I'm not spending it below that. You know what I mean? Like, and having just like shifting that relationship. So I think like setting the external goals, even though they feel like notably different or somewhat uncomfortable. And then starting to dig in, like, you know, what's going on. I mean, it sounds like there's a piece of like, I mean, I guess like messages that I hear in that story is like, you know, like you don't need a lot, right? Like we have what we need. It's not a lot. Like, and you don't necessarily, and like, you know, the point is to sort of like manage within this amount, not to just be like, well, let's try to make more money.
Right.
You know, if we want to be able to do this and this, we could cut this, or we could try to earn more, right? In some sort of way. Or like, what does it look like to be like, okay, well, if you want that thing, like make a lemonade stand, or like get a job at the mall, or, you know, like those kinds of things, right? Like pushing to be like, actually, like it's possible to have more things. And then what's the other thing that was coming? It's like, yeah, I don't know, just sort of like a feeling of like this is the way it is. Like, it's just like that limitation just is the way it is, right? Like there just is limitation and it's pretty tight and there's enough, but there's a tightness to it and there's not excess and there's not like an abundance. And that's just sort of the way it is. So I would say on that kind of like magical energetic front, I would look at working some kind of like abundance magic, because sometimes people feel uncomfortable with like abundance because it sort of feels like excessive. So in that, well, I would recommend, I have a money magic zine and there's like some things in there about like different abundance exercises. One of them is to do, I call it like a cash bath, which is like to get at some point in the month when you like have enough money in your bank account to do it, to go get basically like several hundred to like $1,000 in ones and just like put them on your bed and roll around in them and just like really, yes, just like everywhere, like all over yourself, and really like absorb that the energy of like money and just like what does it feel like to just be like literally like rolling around in money and just like having money like all over. So that's an exercise. There's another thing that is like an abundance bath where so it's like you do it in the bath or the shower. I mean, you could do it outside too and then like hose off, but basically to take like things that feel really abundant to you, so different like fruits, like I think about like pomegranate, or like I always think of watermelon because it has like a really good smash. We're doing some smashing. And like rose water, like a bottle of rose water, like honey, things that just feel like really luxurious and abundant to you, and just kind of like having like a full sensory experience with those things, right? Like basically like pouring them all over your body, like smashing them all over your body, just like getting really messy, like playing in substances that feel really abundant and kind of like invoke abundance for you. So maybe that's like a ton of rose petals, or, you know, something like that, that just like really feels like it brings an energetic and physical experience of abundance. So I would say it's not like Taurus season, we're in Venus, like, you know, we want to do it. So really, I would say like upping those kinds of like sort of physical sensory experiences, like creating sensory experiences of abundance. So like what, and things that feel like a little uncomfortable, like over the top to you, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to like take a bath in like, you know, 3 gallons of like whole milk or something. Just be like, I don't know, that seems a little wild, but like whatever it is, like that just like feels something like a little over the top, but like really decadent to you and physical. And then potentially creating kind of like altar space that's like about abundance, right? So it's not necessarily about like money issues, but really about abundance. So like fruit, flowers, like butterflies, bees, like pollination, really like, you know, planting seeds, things that are like about like really like experiencing abundance. And then, you know, there's going to be like, again, that emotional piece, right? Like, okay, what is it that's in here? Like, do I feel like, who is this limitation created by? You know, is the limitation created by my mom? Is it like, you know, was I actually told like, don't expect for things to be any easier than this, you know, on some conscious or subconscious level, you know? Was I kind of told like, yeah, no matter what you do or how hard you try, like there's always going to be some sort of struggle. Is it more like your own inner child, right? Sometimes we have a thing where we're like, oh, we shut down our own like sense of desiring. We limit what we want in order to be like not a problem for our parents. Like, okay, well, I don't want to like ask for a lot. So then I'm going to actually just be like, oh, well, I don't need that. You know, I don't need that stuff. I don't need to like make a lot. I'm a person who doesn't care about like what kind of clothes I wear or, you know, whatever it is, like things that we kind of create for ourselves that may or may not be true, you know, or might like engage parts of your real personality with like things that are sort of defense mechanisms. So I think like, yeah, digging in on some of that, or even like people feel subconscious, like guilt or glass ceiling stuff, I think sometimes about like being more successful than their parents. Like if that feels like some sort of betrayal, you know, like if that felt like, oh, this is something we're in together, you know what I mean? Like we're poor, but we're like a family that really like, you know, we're like getting through this together, you know what I mean? In some sort of like solidarity. And if there's something about like being not in the struggle, right? Like there's a lot of sense of solidarity in financial struggle, or if you found connection with other people, right? Like working in the arts and being like, yeah, we're all struggling, or like my immediately community is struggling, or my friends are all struggling, you know? Or even like, different kinds of privilege guilt, right? Like feeling like, oh, well, I don't want to like, you know, if you are a white person, like, I don't want to like make money because it makes me sort of feel weird and uncomfortable. Like, you know, other people are struggling and I'm not struggling. Which honestly to me is like, I really believe and recommend that like people who have the capacity to earn money do it, because a lot of people in our communities like don't have the capacity to earn as much money. And if you do have the capacity to be a higher earner, then you should do it and bring that money into your community, or into your family, or into your friendship circle, or, you know, whatever it's going to be. And then I think, so from a logistical level, I guess we talked about the logistics kind of first, right? Like setting those external goals, but also making a plan to get there, you know, and kind of reverse engineering it, and not just being like, I'm making this goal and then 3 years in a row, I'm like not hitting it. And then I'm starting to like get the message for myself, like, yeah, I can't do it. You know what I mean? Like I thought I knew I couldn't do this, or, you know what I mean? I knew it would be impossible to make that much money, or like whatever it's going to be. Right. So to be like, what does it look like? Like you're going to make this amount of money through what? You know what I mean? Like, okay, that means, for example, if it's the coaching group, right? Like, okay, that means if you're making, you know, whatever it's going to be, just for numbers that are easy, we're going to say like, I'm going to make $40,000 doing this coaching group. Okay, that means, and I run this program 4 times a year. That means I have to make $10,000 like each time. That means if I divide that by how many people there is, this is how many people had to be in my coaching group every time. You know, what has been happening? What's my average of like how many people? And then what's the gap between that? And then like, how am I going to fix that? Right? Like, okay, do I need to get on a different social media platform? Do I need to like, you know, go to some in-person like networking events? Do I need to like strengthen my email list? Like, you know, do I need to lower the price or increase the price? Do I need to, am I looking at it and being like, actually that amount of money is not going to come from just doing these coaching groups. I need to like also offer something else. And then like, what is that? You know, okay, I want to try to do $20,000 off the coaching groups, and then I'm going to do $20,000 off something else. So maybe I'm going to start opening up like one-on-one sessions, or, you know, things like that. Right. So really having like a logistical plan as well about like how you're going to get there, and then like keeping that site moving forward, to keep like thinking of and envisioning like how can you attain some of these like larger goals.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have additional questions?
No, that felt good. It's interesting. I love the like 3-point, like looking at things from practical, logistical, emotional, spiritual, magical, energetic. And it may be like my double Taurusness is like the practical part is first for me. Like that's so easy. Like I'll set the number goal. I'll break down how to hit it. And then if I'm not hitting it, like that's how I always know there's some emotional thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, it's always like when you're not seeing your desires manifest, there's usually a misalignment between your intention and your belief in your ability to achieve it, or your belief in your ability to have it, right? So it's like, I think like what really hit it for me, there were two things. One is the idea of like, I'm the kind of person who doesn't ask for that much. That being like a core thing for me that started when I was really young. And the other one is the like the feeling of tightness, or like there's no wiggle room, and really just identifying that like lack of abundance feeling in relation to finances. And I even noticed it, and I've talked with the group about this before. I especially have it when it comes to like spending money on myself. That's a place where I will tell myself I can't afford stuff that I really probably could afford, but is like a luxury item, according really to my mom, like not to me.
Yeah.
So it's just good to really get into that flow of there being abundance, and noticing that like, even if I feel intellectually comfortable with the idea of the money, and even when I look at it practically and it looks completely doable, if my energetic relationship to my finances is there, it's always tight, then there's not going to be a shift, right? So
it makes me think too of like this idea of like what feels comfortable to you, right? And it's like if you're used to things feeling kind of tight, then when they loosen up, it's not necessarily a relieving feeling.
No, it's scary. It's like too much space.
Yeah, it can feel uncomfortable, or it can feel like you're saying, like with the scariness and the too much space, it makes me think of like a boundary, right? In the way that like kids want to feel that like close boundary, and then it's like having a little more spaciousness feels like just really disorienting. Like I don't even know where I am because I like can't feel the boundary, you know? And so with that, right, like it's like, okay, well, if things are super tight, I mean, another thing that is coming up to me is like the thing about agency, right? And like when things are super tight and you only have enough money for exactly what you need, and like, you know, kind of practical things, then you know exactly what you're going to do with your money, right? And you feel really skilled in that skill set because that's how you were raised, right? Like you're like, actually, I know how to look at, you know, whatever, $3,500 a month and be like, okay, cool. Here's how it's all going to break down, you know? And I feel like I'm making good choices and, you know, all that. But once I get to $5,000 a month, then I'm like, okay, well, there's this extra $1,500. What should I be doing? Should I be saving for retirement? Should I be like buying more stuff for myself? Should I like move into a different house? Like, what should I even do? Like, I don't even know how to do this, you know? And it's like out of your comfort zone and maybe out of your like skill set that you've like built over time. And then that feels disempowering. You know what I mean? Because you're like, oh, I feel like really together, like when I'm managing like $3,500 a month, but when I'm hitting like 5,000, I don't know how to manage it. And then maybe that's bringing up like class issues, or, you know, feeling like, oh, I don't know how to be a person who like properly manages wealth. Like I just shouldn't have it, or, you know, like all those different pieces that kind of come together with that. But it's just something, it's just less comfortable and it's less in your comfort zone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a question? Alexandra, do you have a question? I'm like, I can see your face.
And your cute little cat.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of questions, and my brain's blah, 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 out my ears. One thing I noticed as I was writing notes was, well, one, if I start, I was one of the kids that like, no, you can't have this, for too poor. Like, that was drilled into me real hard, and I'm having to reprogram that. And I'm finding now that whenever I feel like I want something and I tell myself, no, you can't have that, I'm good at living in denial for a while, but then I'll splurge on thing. So this little binge. And it's usually something that I really truly want. But I'm struggling with, how do I want that thing but also not feel guilty about that thing, but also really be healthier about just buying the thing and not having to deny myself all the other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things, right, is maybe some like reality testing, you know, like reality checking of like when you have that feeling of like, oh, I can't have that, or, you know, I don't really need it or whatever, to do some checking in of like, well, actually, what do the finances look like? Can I have it? You know what I mean? Can I have it if I just want it? Like, is it fine? Is it fine for me to have it? And also, like, do I need it? Because I feel like sometimes people will really deny things to themselves that they like are like, oh, I don't really need that, but like literally really do. You're like, oh, I don't need that, like, you know, $25 like rose scented lotion I need. You know, I do need lotion. I'm totally using all those like little bottles that came from the hotels, or you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really need it. But it's like, you know, actually you're like a grown ass woman who's like entitled to have some lotion that didn't come from a hotel, you know? So yeah. It's like, you know, those kinds of, so like just doing that reality checking. And then I think I like to do this thing with actual budgeting where it's like, if there is limitation, to get like more nuanced about where the limitations, where I'm gonna like have limitation and where like limitation is actually unnecessary or not healthy, because I feel like it does sort of limit that like deprivation, like splurge type of behavior. So I think of it the most with things like eating out, right? Because that's often like a really big category on people's budgets. So when people are kind of like doing a budgeting project, I'm like, when you're like looking at how much money you spend and you're like either doing mint or you're going to like do it all out on a spreadsheet or something like that, like don't make like eating out like one category. You know, make it, because it's not one thing, right? Like it's all these little habits. It's like going to get coffee, you know, at the cafe on your way to work. It's, you know, buying lunch at work because you didn't like meal prep and pack a lunch. It's ordering food at night because you're too tired to cook. It's, you know, taking your family out to eat. It's you know, date night. It's going to bars. Like it's all these different things, right? So if all we do is we do our budget and then we're looking at it and we're like, oh my God, I'm spending like, you know, $500 a month on eating out, like that's completely insane, you know, then all that happens is we're like, every time we go out and we're going to exchange money for pre-prepared food, we're like, oh God, I shouldn't do this, you know? And then we do it that a number of times, but that experience of being like denied or deprived is really stressful. And eventually you're going to kind of snap on it, you know? So it's like, you may do that for a week and then be like, fuck it, I'm getting a Frappuccino, like, I don't care, you know? Like blow it out. Like, I'm going to go to this really fancy meal or whatever it is. When, like, if you broke it all down by category, you might see like, oh, okay, well, I'm spending, you know, $75 a month, like, on coffee and, you know, $150 a month on like getting food at the office. I really want to get my coffee out. That's like super important to me, but I actually would not mind like shifting the habit of packing my lunch. So if I really just focus in there, then I don't have to have that experience of feeling guilty every time I'm at the cafe, because I can know that I'm like addressing it in a different way, right? So I think like it's like everybody has limitations, and there's going to be limitations somewhere, right? It's like there's going to be a financial limit somewhere. And figuring out like where the actual financial limits are, and then you know, making choices within that about like things that maybe you need to limit, but things that you actually can't have too, right? Like having yeses as well as nos, and making like clear for yourself like where those yeses are going to be, so that you're like, actually, yes, there is a budget for this. There is a budget for skincare. There is a budget for clothes shopping, or there is a budget for things that like might be deemed excessive by our parents, right? When we were children. Or looking at the things that you like tend to repeatedly deny yourself and see if they all fall in a certain category, right? Like, oh, are those things that are like, I've definitely heard it come up with multiple clients. Like, I think sometimes people feel ashamed about spending money on things that are kind of like too femme. And there's this kind of like, I have a client who, like, her dad used to say to her, like, when she wanted things like, you know, clothes or makeup or that kind of stuff, he would say like, where did you learn that in princess school? It's like something that's like stuck with me, you know, but like that kind of like feminine shaming, right? Where it's like things that are about like having a nice home, or things that are about like your appearance, or like whatever it is that your parents deemed like not important, you know, or like excessive, or like were judgmental towards specifically, or kind of shamed around specifically. Having like just noticing if the things that you desire, or even the things that you tend to kind of like splurge on after a long period of deprivation, like fall in those categories or not. And giving yourself permission to like engage in spending in those categories. Yeah.
Crazy. Wow. Like,
money misogyny just hit me so deep. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, money misogyny for sure.
dude. And my mom died when I was little, and I was raised by my dad. I was very tomboyish, because that's how you survive when you're raised by a very impoverished dad.
Yeah.
That's really how I survived. And holy shit, all of that just like stabbed me in the heart, man.
Yeah.
Wow. But I bought cute underwear this weekend, and I'm proud of myself. So
Yeah, I like that, right? Like to be like, yeah, how are you even like limiting your experience of like your self-expression? You know, how is that interrelated with money, you know, and like, and feeling like, yeah, like what are the things that you really feel like bad about spending on? And giving yourself maybe more like intentional permission. I like the idea of like creating a budget around it, you know? So if it's like, okay, I'm going to have like a femme budget or whatever, like this is, and it's like within the realm of reality, then you can kind of like create a boundary for yourself that's not about limitation or deprivation, but it's around sort of like feeling safe, like having a container, not necessarily a limit, but like a container, you know, to express that in, right? So if you're like, okay, well, I really actually, you know, at the financial place I'm in right now, like I really can spend whatever it is, you know, $250 a month on, you know, skincare, clothing, what, you know, cute panties, like whatever it is, or it's $50, or it's, you know, whatever it's going to be, right? But just being like, oh, I actually do get this money. And, you know, if I want something that's in that budget, it's like, just like, oh, does it fit in, you know, can I spend it? You know, is it in that limit or not? Right. One other thing I wanted to say, or that brings up to me, is I've done a lot of thinking, like more in terms of relationships, but it's definitely also in the relationship with ourselves, right? It's like when we think about perpetuating patterns of abuse, right? We often think about the way that we perpetuate patterns of like things that are more active, right? Like, oh, physical violence, or like yelling or judging or criticizing, or, you know, like those kinds of things. And I think less about like the ways that we perpetuate patterns of neglect or deprivation. And I think it's really important to like take a look at, you know, what are the ways that like you know, even if we can like forgive our parents or like not judge them for whatever experience of things that felt neglectful or like depriving, you know, to be like, okay, like, you know, we're in poverty because of these circumstances, and you know, my dad is like dealing with grief and, you know, mourning, like all these different things, and isn't like prepared to raise kids on his own or whatever it is, like to just be like, yeah, I did have an experience of feeling deprived, where there were things that I like needed to feel good as like a teenage girl that I just like didn't get, you know, or like wasn't given access to. And that is a certain experience of neglect, and like to not continue to perpetuate that on ourselves.
My heart.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you.
Everybody else has their video turned off. I don't know what's going on over there. Maybe people are like cooking dinner. I know Kim has her video turned off and has the whole call because she's sick, and she was like, I don't feel good, but I want to be there.
Yeah, totally.
We're sending you love. Yay. Hi. So I want to be really mindful of your time. I know we started a couple minutes late, but I also know you had a cap to get back to your little one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything before we go?
No. Okay. I want to say be mindful, like especially if you're like working through something, or we like talked about something tonight, which is like the three of you that I could see on the video right now. Just that, like, you know, it's like dealing like excavation, like emotional excavation, whether it's new or not, is still like work. So like make sure that you give yourself space to rest, and also to make sure that you like maybe do something that like moves some energy, right? So some kind of clearing with like whatever is your tools that you use, even like just taking a shower, taking a bath, or taking a walk, or like, you know, shaking your body out or something to just kind of like move some of the energy, and then making sure you get a good night's sleep. Oh, drinking water, also helpful. I feel like when we're doing like emotional or releasing work. So happy new moon in Taurus. Many, many blessings on your financial healing. And you can, if you're Instagram people, you can find me on Instagram at Money.Witch. And I look forward to being in conversation with me further if you want to be.
Thank you so much.
Oh, go ahead.
Chatted. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, y'all. Was that good? Was that helpful? Do you feel like you got stuff out of it? Good. I'm so glad. Yay. All right, cool. Well, I can't see anyone else, so if they are doing anything or saying anything, I can't see it. Kimberly says, thanks for all the info. Okay, yay. All right, Marcus, I hear you. It's dinner time. Thank you so much. I will talk to you all in the group. Love you. Good night.